The newest thriller from M Night Shyamalan hits theaters this weekend. Now, is his latest film more Sixth Sense or The Happening? Let's find out. It's no secret that in the eyes of many, M. Night has fallen from grace after really blowing the world away with The Sixth Sense. And although I'd personally argue that Unbreakable, Signs, and The Village are all deserving of far more respect than they have received, there's no denying that for a lot of people, M. Night Shyamalan has been kind of a lost cause. Because it's not like he was just making bad movies, because he was making like exceptionally bad movies. Some of the worst that I've ever seen, to be frank. But even through all of that, I have still been such a fan of his work. The kind of work that I know he is capable of delivering, which is kind of what we saw with a return to form with The Visit and Split, the latter of which being not just a good, but legitimately great movie. Now, even with films like Glass, which I wasn't over the moon about, it seemed like we were starting to see the M. Night Shyamalan that we were all so fondly remembering. And in true Shyamalan fashion, his newest film is probably more enjoyable if you know as little about it as possible, but for the sake of this review, I think the entire concept of this movie can be summarized with just one sentence. In this film, a family takes a vacation to a remote island where they start to notice that the longer that they stay on this island, the more they rapidly begin to age. It's one of those movies that is simple enough that you can really sum it up in an elevator pitch that just really hooks you in almost immediately. Unfortunately though, the end result is not as engaging as the brief plot synopsis would lead you to believe. Now, that's not to say that this movie is boring, because it isn't. In fact, that's probably one of the better things that I can say about Old, is that, for better or worse, I sure was curious where it was going. Unfortunately though, for this movie, my interest was not quite at the level of Signs, where I was really on the edge of my seat, wondering what was going to happen next because I was invested. No, it was actually more closer to The Happening, where for the life of me, I just couldn't seem to look away. And if you've seen The Happening, you probably have an idea of what I'm talking about, because not only are there some pretty large leaps in logic in this film, but like The Happening, this movie is unintentionally just pretty funny. I wish I was kidding, I really do, but there were just more than a few times in this movie where the entirety of the theater that I saw this movie at was openly laughing at this film, which is, yeah, that's pretty rough. And watching this film, it is hard to tell what's intentionally funny and what's not with this movie. And it's not like there's this uncomfortable line that the movie tiptoes, because more oftentimes than not, it kind of goes far over it. Because this movie just has so many moments that are just so ridiculous and honestly pretty dumb that you just can't help but laugh. That paired with the fact that this movie really does have some, I'll be generous and say, questionable performances in this movie, all of which just really dissolve any chance of this movie having really any real sense of tension or anxiety throughout it. It just kind of degrades into this car crash. Believe me, I'm as disappointed in saying that as you are probably hearing it. Now, after seeing this movie, I just kind of had to dig a bit deeper, because this movie is loosely based off of, the 2010 graphic novel called Sandcastle. And the reason I say it is loosely based from that is because from what I've gathered, I haven't read that, but from what I've understood, this film and that book share the same plot, but seemingly not much else. And I think this is where a lot of the root causes of Old may kind of start to show their face a little bit, because despite the fact that I haven't read this book, from what I've gathered, it's pretty ambiguous and doesn't offer a ton of answers about what is actually happening on this beach. Why are people aging so quickly? Well, that's kind of up to the reader to interpret. But with this film, we are not only provided an answer, but it is also thoroughly spelled out for us in a patented Shyamalan twist ending, something the filmmaker is well known for having in his movies, so I don't really feel like I'm spoiling anything there. But this is one of the rare cases in a Shyamalan film where I think this movie would have been a bit better off without a twist ending and being a bit more ambiguous. See, towards the end of the film, the audience is provided with most, if not all, of the answers to the questions that this movie proposes. Because when you have a premise that is so bizarre and is almost like a fable of sorts, when you provide all the answers to the questions that you have about it, it does kind of strip the movie of the mystery of it all. And although I can admire an attempt to be made by Shyamalan to provide these answers and a more finite conclusion to his movie as opposed to the book, the answers provided are just kinda dumb. And if anything, they just raise far more questions than answers. There are so many questions that I had leaving this movie, and not the kind of questions that will reveal themselves eventually if I was to rewatch this movie and really dissect it. No, it was just kind of more like, well, if that's the case, then what about this? And, well, if that happened, then why didn't this happen? Questions that the more and more you begin to ask really begin to chip away at this movie to the degree that it kind of spoils the whole experience. And in a lot of Shyamalan movies, you can go back and piece together the thread and see how some things were foreshadowed here, which led to that. And although these types of details are in this movie, there are just so many more other details that once you start to really pull on that thread, the whole thing just starts to unravel, which is a true disappointment because I think there is a really fascinating story to be told here about the inevitability of growing older and the horror that can come from that. And while there are elements of that in this movie, it is far more concerned with providing a twist to shock audiences. But unfortunately for this film, the only thing that really shocked me with this movie is just how bad it actually is. So did you guys see Old? What did you think about it? I'd love to know where it ranks for you in regards to Shyamalan's other films, so make sure you leave your thoughts and opinions down below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you liked today's video. And if you did, you can click on the link down below, where you can subscribe to my channel to see more movie reviews and movie-related things. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.